When you think of monsters, usually the first thing that comes to mind is demons, werewolves, and zombies. You never think of the suburban dad of 3 young kids, married, living the American dream. Unfortunately for these young women, these monsters walked among us without anyone ever knowing. My name is Anthony Valentine, and this is the Chicago Ripper Crew. From 1981 to 1982, Chicago was plagued with one of the worst satanic cults America has ever seen. If 6 confirmed kills weren't enough, they were suspects in over 17 missing person cases. The Ripper Crew was made up of 4 seemingly normal men. The leader, 28-year-old Robin Geck, was married with 3 kids, working a regular blue-collar job. Edward Spritz was only 21 years old. Then you have the Cocorales brothers, 30-year-old Thomas and 19-year-old Andy. Now, some sources say that they were responsible for 20 missing women. Some say it was closer to 17. Now, there is really no way to tell because these animals didn't have a certain victimology. They went after whatever vulnerable woman they could find. All their victims seemed random. Different ages, different races. The only thing that they had in common were that they were all women. Geck convinced these men that doing these horrific things, making these human sacrifices, and taking part in these rituals would grant them supernatural powers. The things that they did to these women were truly horrible. Geck had turned his attic into his own personal satanic temple. Everything was lit by candlelight, walls were covered in black crosses, altars were covered in red cloth. On the altar, police found his satanic Bible, where they found the passage used in the sacrifices. Geck and his crew would take these women up to the attic, where each man would take his turn beating, raping, and torturing these women. As if this wasn't bad enough, these men would amputate the woman's left breast with a garrote, a piece of piano wire or guitar string, and do things to the wound on the woman's chest. Now, I refuse to go into detail, but use your imagination, because it's really bad. When I hear these men took the left breast, the same question popped into my head that probably popped into yours. What the hell did they do with it? Geck would cut off a small piece and hand it to each of the men, where they would complete their satanic ritual by eating part of the breast. Thomas later admitted that when they first started, Geck showed him a box where he kept the amputated breast and there were already over a dozen. October 7th, 1982 was the day the world would learn the name Beverly Washington, the 20-year-old woman who was discovered naked and barely alive on the side of the railroad track, was able to give a description of the 4 men and the van that they used in the attack. On November 7th, all 4 of these scumbags were arrested. Placed in separate interrogation rooms, Andrew was the first to crack, confessing to 7 murders, even leading the cops to a body from a few months prior. When interrogated, the men flipped on Geck pretty fast. This is where things get strange. Even in different rooms, they all had the same story. They felt that Geck had supernatural-like powers, that they never wanted to do any of this, but once Geck asked them to do anything, they became in a trance-like state, losing control of their body and the ability to think for themselves. Andrew was sentenced to death by lethal injection and was the last in the state to be executed. Spretzer was sentenced to life without parole. Thomas was released only serving half of his sentence. He was released on parole. Geck was never charged with any of the murders. Even with multiple eyewitnesses, they didn't have enough to convict him. Instead, he was charged with rape, attempted murder, and sentenced to 120 years, but is up for parole in 2022. Now, I know that this case is very brutal, and our hearts go out to the families of these victims. But there were a few things that stood out about this case to me. All the members believed Geck had supernatural powers. Could this have been the reason that he almost walked away, or was it just luck? Now, another thing that caught my attention was Geck originally worked with the notorious clown killer John Wayne Gacy. They were close friends working in the same company for a while. Now, for a while, police believed John Wayne Gacy had a partner. Could it have been Geck? I personally believe this is one hell of a coincidence. I believe it's very unlikely that they did not work together at one point or another. Now, if these satanic rituals worked, and he did have some sort of powers, could these murders kick up again if or when he's released? Now, the sorrow does not stop there. The 2 detectives who caught the Ripper Crew, Thomas Flynn and Philip Murphy, would go on to accept awards for catching the murderers and solving the case. But a year later, Detective Philip Murphy would lose everything he worked hard for due to the effect of a stroke. 4 years later, he would be known for something else: the murder of his wife and his soon after suicide. Thank you for watching. If you want more of the Spookables, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Also, if you have a topic that you want us to cover, let us know in the comment section below.
Until next time, spook you later.